Hey, how's it going, captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Hiryu, and more specifically, it's about carriers below tier 8, kind of. More like tier 7 and below. And the reason why is because these are the carriers that are not enjoyable to play in most situations. As you climb the ladder of the tiers, of course, it gets better for the carriers because tier 9 is where heaven starts and tier 8 is average. Tier 7, tier 6, you're going to suffer, especially in tier 7, because I think tier 7 is possibly the worst part of playing carriers. And I don't think it's because the ship or the planes, it's because of the matchmaking and what you got to deal with. Because at tier 7 you got something like the Saipan, and still waiting for the Kaga to be released in North America. But you know, you would think about it, Saipan, you face a Saipan, if the Saipan player knows what they're doing, they're gonna abuse that tier 9 planes. Kaga, when she faces a Ranger or a Hiryu, all she has to do is just lock down the fighters and send her torpedo bombers and potentially win the strike battle in the beginning match if she wishes to strike out a carrier. Yeah. That's the life of tier 7. Not only that, tier 7 feels like tier 6, where when you play like a tier 6 carrier like the Independence or Ryujo, and you get matched up against a North Carolina, Colorado, Gneisenau, Bismarck, Amagi, Cleveland, Pensacola, New Orleans, Chapaya, Shaw's, you know, all those ships that can shoot down your planes, which is practically a lot of ships that I listed. Yeah, it's not really that fun at tier 6, except that it translates to tier 7, because then tier 7 you face more lethal weapons like the Iowa or the Baltimore or the Rune. Yeah, you kind of get the idea. So that is the topic of the video today. How do you deal with this situation as a tier 7 carrier? And what I have here today is, oh my gosh, this is one of the most beautiful carriers in this game. It is the tier 7 Hiryu from the Japanese with the Hinomaru on her flight deck. In the Battle of Midway, the Americans used the Hinomaru as a target. So if you look at a picture of the Hiryu after she was struck by the Enterprise, I believe, there's like a huge hole on the frontal part of the flight deck. Now the flames and the damage of the explosion was able to disable Hiryu's engines that are located in the midship part. So yeah, Hiryu was lost during the Battle of Midway. But my gosh, look at that. You got the Mitsubishi. Those are one of the variants of the Zeros. These are better than the previous Ryujo A6M2 Zeros. The B5N2 torpedo bombers. Yeah, the Nakajimas. And the Aichi dive bombers. Now, the biggest problem with the Hiryu is that she still has tier 6 planes. And there's no such thing as tier 7. Ranger, on the other hand, has tier 7 planes, so Ranger planes are better than the Hiryu. But Ranger, this is the first American carrier, like the first actual design carrier. I know there's like the Lexington, there's the Saratoga, and Langley. Those were carriers before this one, but this is the first American carrier that was designed from keel up. And the Americans, you know, they were trying to think of a way to make their carriers go faster. And one of the ways was to have light armor. So yeah, this thing gets melted pretty badly. I mean, you gotta give it to them because the previous carrier, excluding the Independence, because I think the Independence is actually newer. Yeah, she's newer than the Ranger. But like, man, Americans, they have the tractors. These things are so slow. When I was playing the Bogue, it was so depressing to see this thing move because the first half of the game, you're going full steam ahead since you spawned in and you're still not around the map, or at least some part of another part of the map to escape the enemy. Like once you spot in the Langley or the Bogue, it's just depressing. But yeah, you gotta give it to the Americans. But Ranger, you know, the Ranger has better planes, but if you consider her loadout, not so great because you have the strike loadout, which has no fighters, or the more preferable loadout would be the air superiority loadout or the balanced loadout, but the balanced loadout doesn't specialize in anything. Like when you play the balanced loadout on the American carriers before the Essex, you feel like you're not doing something because you're not winning the air battles exactly because you're not air superiority, nor are you winning the damage battle because you're not a strike carrier. Like the Japanese are the same, like, you know, they're balanced, but they have that slight edge towards either air superiority or either more on the strike. Like they can't be a ranger with strike when it comes to damage potential, but since, you know, the Hiryu has fighters and just gonna counter the planes, the Hiryu is going to win against a ranger. And the Hiryu was designed as a real carrier, like has actual armor. It was actually designed like off of a cruiser hull. The first Japanese carrier that was built from keel up is the Soryu. Hiryu was a variant of the Soryu. Originally, she was supposed to be the sister ship to the Soryu, but when the Japanese were building the Hiryu, they enlarged the Hiryu, which creates her own class. So there's one class, that's the Soryu, only herself in the class, and there's the Hiryu, which originally supposed to be the sister ship of the Soryu, but she became her own class. And then it came the Shokaku, which is the Shokaku is an enlarged version of the Hiryu. And yeah, so Tier 7, very rough, and I do have a gameplay of the particular, the game of me that I would see like anyone who plays Tier 7 carriers or even Tier 6 will get into the situation, because once you hit Tier 8 is the first tier where it's reasonable to play carrier. Now, you still will get those games in a Tier 8 where when you play Shokaku or Lexington, you face like Des Moines, Montanas, Hindenburgs, you face Yamatos, you face Baltimore more often. Tier 8, it's... how would I describe Tier 8? It's like the average Joe. It's okay at times, and the only time you do well in Tier 8 is if you're getting into the upper tier matchmaking. You can only do well if the enemy team is dispersed. If the enemy team is grouped up, you're completely screwed. Don't try. Like, no matter how hard you try to throw the rock at the wall, that wall ain't coming down at all. That wall is not going to collapse, so don't even bother. But I'm going to show you guys a gameplay, and the first half of the gameplay I'm going to be talking about how we should deal with it, but I'm going to be honest with you guys. The gameplay doesn't look fun to play. Like, it doesn't look fun to watch, but magically, because in this situation, when you get into this lock, when you put into pitfall with a carrier that's below Tier 9, in most cases you just can't do anything. Your average damage would be 10,000 to 20,000, and that's for an average player. Okay. Now, that's when the enemy team has North Carolinas and everyone is grouped up, stacked together, go to one side. And in any situation, if you face a Saipan who has Tier 9 fighters, or you face a air superiority ranger, it's just horrible. It's just awful. And on the ranger side, if you're running the strike ranger, which I did, I know I'm crazy. Yeah, it just gets worse for some odd reason. My ranger has a higher win rate compared to my Hiryu, and I think the ranger also has a higher average damage compared to my Hiryu. But the Hiryu, at least the Hiryu, is better as a carrier compared to the ranger when it comes to the loadout and as a ship. But I think the ranger had a higher win rate because that was my second time around with carriers, and at the time, the game isn't mature at that time, okay? So everyone was playing still Tier 4 to Tier 6. That was the average, tier at the time. Today, the average tier is Tier 7 to Tier 9. So in a long time, like in a very long time, today I decided to take out my Hiryu, and the first two matches were averaged at Tier 8 and Tier 9. Yeah, it wasn't fun. But the second game, I managed to do some amazing things in order to pull off some weird stuff, and at the same time, don't mind the argument, because I do get into some little drama with somebody who was upset about what I was doing with my carrier. Because come on now, I can't do crap in a Tier 9 matchmaking. You're not going to send Tier 6 torpedo bombers at those Iowas. Even an Izumo can screw you over. Even an Amagi, even it just doesn't make sense to send your planes for free. So obviously you gotta do something different in order to make a living with tier 7. And like I said, tier 7, it's the matchmaking. You gotta deal with the Saipan, you gotta deal with the Kaga that's coming out soon that I'm hoping to get in the future. And you gotta do it to like 120k XP grind. Like the Ryujo had the same situation as the Hiryu. Same thing goes with the Independence and the Ranger. Except that those two carriers, the tier 6 carriers, only have to deal with it to 50k XP. It's been a while since I played at tier 6. Let's pick a ship that I have not unlocked at tier 6. Oh yes, La France. Let's look at the French. Okay, 37,000. Wait, is this a... Yeah, 37,000. So around 37,000 to 50,000, you unlock the tier 7 ship. So yeah, it's not that bad. But when you get to... Wait a second, it should be 100,000 XP. I remember it should be 100,000 because when I was playing the battleships, it was 100,000. Is there any other ships that can... Okay, I swear it was 100,000. I swear it was 100,000. At least 100,000 for battleships and carriers. I don't recall, but the point is that you're going to be spending a lot of time playing the Hiryu Ranger at tier 7, and you got to suffer through the matchmaking. It's the reality of carriers. So I'm going to show you guys what I do in this situation. Alright, you guys. This is the game. Now, I don't recall what ships are in this match. You will find out, but I can certainly tell you there is a lot of Bismarck, there is a North Carolina, there's just a lot of anti-air, and the enemy team does stay together. They do stack up like wolves in the pack, and the moment you see that, when you see a bunch of anti-air ships with the enemy team stacked together, there's just no point of sending your torpedo bombers to go into a strike. And the reason why is because they're going to get shot down. They're just simply going to get shot down. If you know the outcome, don't bother waste your resources, especially with the Japanese carrier, because the Hiryu still has tier 6 torpedo bombers, and torpedo bombers are the main source of damage, not the dive bombers, the torpedo bombers, because dive bombers, they're only good for the fires. It's not like the Americans. Ranger, on the other hand, if you're running the Strike Ranger, it really depends. Actually, the Strike Ranger will handle the situation better, because if you're facing a carrier that doesn't have fighters, which the Ranger herself, so you're facing another Strike Ranger, or you're facing a carrier player who doesn't know how to use their fighter as efficient as you expect them to do, they going to let you have free farm, because in terms of the Ranger, people don't move out of the way when it comes to the dive bomber. So the Ranger has an easier time with this situation because it's easier to set up a dive bomb attack, and torpedo bomber, yeah, they're just going to get shot down anyways to begin with. But your main source of damage will be dive bombers with the Ranger. So what do you do in this situation? And I want to say this as clear as possible before someone says that, you know, they watch the entire gameplay and it's feel like they didn't see anything the worth of this gameplay. This gameplay is to show you the options of what you should do if you're playing a tier 6, tier 7 carrier and you know for a fact that you can't do crap in the game because of the anti-air. The average damage is to be expected at 10 to 20k, like I said. So if you a person who don't play carriers and you're expecting some crazy, you know, game, this isn't the game, although I do a lot of damage, which surprises me. So I will say that right away, because I think I do a lot of damage to a ship as the game progresses. So the first thing you do, send your fighters out and scout. Second thing you do is strike the enemy carrier, because the enemy carrier is really the only viable option to get damage in this game. There's just no point of setting up for a torpedo bomber attack on the North Carolina. It just doesn't make sense. Gneisenau, if there's a Gneisenau, most likely she's going to be grouped up with some sort of cruiser. Like, look at the enemy team on the map. They're grouped up so well. There's the Izumo, and you gotta think about it. This is the beginning of the match, so all the anti-air are still fresh. Okay, they have not been hit by the cruisers or destroyers HE. So I did happen to spot the Ranger, and the Ranger is going toward the west side of the map. Like I said, you always want to approach your attack head on, because it doesn't give the enemy ship time to react, and also it's easier to get the attack right away, because the longer you stay in the anti-air zone, at the same time, the longer that you're spotted, the easier for the ship to actually maneuver and set up for a good position to dodge your attack. So I do spot the Ranger. Like I said, it's, the Ranger was really the only option to attack. Just look at the minimap, like the Izumo, there's a bunch of cruisers and, destroyers all over the place, but they're so well grouped. And when I was beginning to play this match, when I was thinking through the match, I really got nothing else to do. So you're gonna see like the other half of the game where I just gonna be arguing somebody. Like I just made this guy day horrible. So I spot the Ranger. Like I said, the Ranger is not that well armored. She doesn't have that survivability. So for a Hiryu like me, and I already took out his fighter in the B flag, this Ranger is already screwed. Like absolutely screwed, because she's the only one that is alone. Because carriers always strike lonely targets, so she's alone, and she's a tier 7 ship, which means that she doesn't have godlike anti-air like the North Carolina. So drop torpedoes. Now almost the Ranger gets out of this one, because she could have not gotten any flood, but I got one flooding. I was lucky enough to get one flooding. At this point, the Ranger is forced to damage control, because if she doesn't, she's going to flood to death. And then this is where I follow up with the dive bomber. Now, whether I get the fire or not, it doesn't matter, because the Ranger is dead. So there you have it. This is the moment I kill this Ranger, the game is set for me. Like I got what I want for the damage, because this is really all I have to do. This is like your average amount of damage for a carrier at tier 7. You're expected to do something like 50k damage to contribute to the game as a strike carrier. So what I do now, because there's really nothing to strike, because everyone's grouped up. These are high tier ships. Is that Iowa I see? Yeah, there's an Iowa. They're just Bismarck. It just, you can't do anything. So if the first option was to strike the carrier and it wasn't successful, and the enemy carrier is really good at protecting his carrier, second option is to just scout. That's the best you can do. So what I did was, after I dropped the dive bomber, I'm behind the enemy lines with my dive bombers. I say, why not just send my dive bombers behind the lines and scout for those battleships that are back there, and let my team, do their thing. Just fire at the ship while you're scouting. So I try to do a strafe on this dive bomber, but yeah, epic fail. So I got nothing to do. This is all you can do. But then again, I did get what I want. First blood and 44,900 damage. So yeah, my dive bombers are scouting. Now, as a Hiryu player, I don't use my torpedo bombers as a scouting tool. And the reason why is because, like I said, they are the main source of damage. So while you're scouting, which is option 2, option 3 is to find a target that is alone. Now, preferably a battleship that has good anti-air, because there's no such thing as a battleship at tier 8, tier 9 that has bad anti-air that can't deal with tier 6 torpedo bombers, but a battleship that is alone with good anti-air in the first half of the game. And the reason why I specify the first half of the game is because the first half of the game, like I said, everyone has nice shiny anti-air. They're still fresh, 100% brand new. But the other half of the game, when all these ships are beat up, that's where their anti-air ratings drop, and that is where you come in with your torpedo bombers that you should not waste in the beginning of the match and try to kill somebody, pick off targets. You really are trying to clean up the kills at the end of the game, and that's how you are expected to play as a carrier. So I'm still using my dive bombers to scout for the ships in the back. At the same time, I'm also using my dive bombers to scout for destroyers, torpedoes, assisting that Lo Yang, and soon I will assist the Fletcher. But that's all I can do. Now, remember when I was talking about option 3, you search for ships that are alone that has decent anti-air, preferably battleships. Use them with your torpedo bombers. Well, guess what? I was very lucky. This Bismarck is offering me a gift. So I spot the Bismarck by herself, which gives me the go-ahead to strike the Bismarck. Remember, set up before you attack, because you want to attack as, in a very clean fashion. So while I'm scouting in the big map view, I'm also setting up the attack. So my torpedo bomber is already set up for a perfect attack, and this is very important when it comes to playing these type of matches because there's just no room for mistakes. Absolutely no room. If you set up while the Bismarck's anti-air is going off, you're just going to lose a lot of planes. Like, these torpedo bombers just get shredded. So yeah, still scouting the destroyers. I scored 7 torpedo hits, which is very surprising. That means I only missed 1 torpedo, or that 1 torpedo plane got shot down. Still scouting for the ships in the back lines. My Squadron 7 is used for scouting torpedoes and destroyers. Squadron 6 is sitting in the back because that's where most battleships sit in high tiers, the back. So yeah, those were scouting for the North Carolina and the other Bismarck. Iowa is pushing up. I use my fighters also to scout. So 2 fighters, 2 dive bombers, those are used for scouting, so I have absolutely control of the sky. Since I already strike out the enemy carrier, I can just, spy on everyone. Enemy team from the C side is going to make their push to B. My team is losing. I can only do so much with damage because this is one of those pitfalls of the high tiers as a tier 7 carrier. Like, I personally would do more damage with a stock Colorado in this game compared to a fully upgraded Hiryu, and possibly a Ranger if I don't face a Saipan or an air superiority Ranger or a good Hiryu captain. Like, if I just face a Strike Ranger, I think this game would have been fine. But still, these guys are grouped up pretty well. So I've been spying this Kiev, and it's just a waiting game. I told you guys, I guarantee that this game wasn't that fun to watch, but people who play carriers at tier 6, tier 7, you might learn something from here. All you can do is scout. Now, I forgot about my torpedo bombers because I wasn't that concerned with getting damage, because it's a waiting game. I'm just dying for this game to be over with. But the one thing I noticed that I did right in this game, aside from doing option 3 to farm damage against the Bismarck, is that the enemy team is short by 1 battleship, because this Bismarck is hunting for me. And oh, that poor soul. He doesn't realize that I'm far away, like very far away from the Bismarck. So the Bismarck is trying really hard to search for me. So I'm going to send my torpedo bombers again, and this time I'm going to sink the Bismarck. Now you notice that I pissed off a Kiev, and I didn't realize it because all I did was just send all my 4 squadron planes that were used for scouting and scout this area. And the Kiev, being a Russian destroyer having awful concealment, was irritated by the fact that I was scouting him this entire time. Okay, I was using my dive bomber to scout for his torpedoes, but I think it was more concerned towards him being spotted. So he lost against the Fletcher, I believe, because the Fletcher probably is in the smoke. And one thing I really wish that Wargaming did was offer the smoke indicator or some kind of smoke little cloud on the big map here, because you don't see it on the mini map or the big map. So I can't tell if a destroyer is smoked up in this view. I had to zoom in. So yeah, since I got nothing else to do, I decided to argue with this Kiev and tell him my life as a carrier playing at a tier 9 matchmaking, and yet he's complaining about his life being really crappy because I was doing the one and only thing that I can do with the Hiryu in this particular matchmaking, and that's the scout. I mean, Kiev, you don't face carriers every match. This is like one of the few matches that you face carriers. But here I go again with the Bismarck. This Bismarck, if this Bismarck did not exist, if the Bismarck didn't do this type of move or made the decision to hunt for me, I guarantee you I would have got like 10k damage out of this game. 10 to 20k. And if the Ranger didn't get striked out, like if the Ranger ran air superiority and knew what he was doing, yeah, I would have just waited for this game to be over. Just waited. Luckily, I strike out the Ranger, so nobody's contesting my plane, so I'm able to do something in scout. Still scouting. My fighter squadron 2 is scouting the Shiratsui for torpedoes. We took out the Bismarck, so now I'm sitting at 113k damage, which that is just too generous for these type of matchmaking. Absolutely too generous. Now with the tier 9 carrier, when I was talking about the tier 9 carrier being like the heaven, if you get into the situation, you can still face this pitfall as a tier 9 carrier and a tier 10 carrier if the enemy team is grouped up and they have a lot of anti-air ships. But at least you have a huge reserve, and at some point there's going to be a ship that sticks out nowhere out of the fleet, not part of the wolf pack, and you're just going to strike them out really easily because Taihos and Essex, they can just delete a battleship in one run if you know what you're doing, if they made that mistake. So since I got nothing else to do, I decided to utilize my social life and talk to this Kia because we want to express our problems with this game. But yeah, this is all I can do. So now looks like the enemy Bismarck is going to push into the B flag for some odd reason. Now this is during the event, so for the hunt for the Bismarck, I think that there's a lot of new battleship players who just got the Bismarck from the campaign. Might not have a clue that the one crucial thing when it comes to playing battleships is to navigate correctly, because if you get out of position with a huge battleship that takes a long time to set up for, you know, your route in terms of trying to act on the situation, if you're far away and you're in a really weird position, like being around a bunch of islands that restrict your turns and your moves, you're hurting your team, like that Bismarck that tried to chase me and this Bismarck that's in between the B and C flag, although most of my teammates are at A. I don't know why the Bismarck is there, but hey, we have freedom to play this game. We play it the way we want to, but it hurts your win rate. It really does. But at the end of the day, if you're having fun, that's what matters. So yeah, here goes for another strike. My friendly Izumo is going to engage the other Izumo, and I honestly thought that we actually held pretty well in this game because we were on the disadvantage. We really lost like most of the advantages, so C was taken right away, B got smashed because they were outnumbered, and most of our battleships were on the A side of the map, and at that point that's usually a recipe for disaster, but magically we managed to hold this long. So our Izumo is going in, and she's going to get taken out. So what I decided to do is that I'm just going to send one of my torpedo bombers to hit the Izumo and the other one to hit the Atago. Now the crazy thing is that I knew for a fact that one torpedo bomber isn't enough to sink the Izumo because Japanese torpedoes don't do that much damage. But magically, yeah, watch this. Yeah, I killed the Izumo with a detonation. Now that's crazy, but the Izumo has the highest detonation rate as a battleship in this game. How did I know this? Did I Google it? No, I did not Google it, because back in 2015 when I was grinding for the Yamato, I got the Izumo and I got detonated a total of, I think, 10 times. And it was only like 80% through the grind. It's just, I was surprised. Like, I was asking myself, battleships get detonated? I thought it was only destroyers, because I was never detonated when I play the Fuso, Kawachi, Myogi, Nagato. I free XP the Amagi because I wanted to get the Yamato right away. So I was playing the stock Amagi, and you know, when I was new at the game, I thought the Amagi was going to be a bad ship because I was witnessing the stock Amagi. Little did I know that the Amagi was a really good ship, but nonetheless, I really want the Yamato, so I just free XP the Amagi. But yeah, the Izumo is the first battleship that have ever been detonated. Actually, the first ship I've ever been detonated in. But yeah, here I finish off the Shiratsuyu, and yeah, that is what you're supposed to do in this type of match. First, if you want to get damage, at least take the initiative to strike out the carrier. If it fails, play the waiting game, look for something to pick off, you know, pick off that Bismarck like I did, and scout. Those are things that you're expected to do, but this game, I was fortunate enough to find a Bismarck that was offering me free damage because he sympathized for me. He was saddened by the fact about my story of my life as a tier 7 carrier in a tier 9 matchmaking in this day and age was awful, and he said, here's some damage, even though I already unlocked the Shokaku. And I'm not able to actually kill this Atago because the game comes to an end. So if you guys got any questions, leave it down in the comment section below. And I told you so, this game was just a waiting game. So yeah, a little bit of drama, waiting, picking off Bismarcks, making fun of people. So aside from that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.